What is going on, bottom line viewers? Frank Clark has just been traded from the Seattle Seahawks to the Kansas City Chiefs in a trade that I called in my latest mock draft. Very excited about that because typically nobody gets anything right on their mock drafts. So I thought that's pretty awesome. But Frank Clark, defensive end, edge rusher of the Seattle Seahawks, has been officially traded to the Kansas City Chiefs for a first-round pick, a second-round pick in 2020, and a swap of third-round picks. Also, in this trade, the reason why the Seahawks traded him was because that the Seattle Seahawks needed to pay him. They weren't willing to pay him. They know that they had to pay Russell Wilson. That's over and done with. They got that done. Russell Wilson, the highest paid player in the NFL. Okay? They also have to pay Bobby Wagner. All right? But there have been some things around Frank Clark in his past that would make you believe that they wouldn't want to pay him. He's had some personal issues, some off-the-field issues, and of course, a team like the Kansas City Chiefs, it's just out there in the open. They are willing to take on these issues, whether they think it's behind Frank Clark or not. I think it is. He hasn't really had an issue in a while, but regardless, you would rather put money into a guy like Bobby Wagner, the leader of your defense, the heart and soul of your team, yada, 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 rather than Frank Clark, a guy with this baggage and this history. Kevil is here as well, which we'll get to Kevil's thoughts. How you doing, Kevil?
Great. How are you, Mitch?
Oh, you're very quiet for some reason. I don't know.
Okay. Better?
You're good now.
Is that better?
Yeah. You're a little fuzzy.
Oh, that better?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. But anyways, we're going to get into our thoughts about the trade. The Chiefs get Frank Clark from the Seattle Seahawks, as I mentioned. And let me know in the comment section. Let us know what you think of this trade. Do you think this is a great haul for the Seattle Seahawks? Do you think that this is a great move by the Kansas City Chiefs? Let us know in the comment section. Love hearing from you guys. Okay, so my initial thoughts on this trade are that the Seattle Seahawks, knowing that Frank Clark has been on the trade block, knowing that the Seattle Seahawks were wanting to trade him, they got good value for him and more. I believe that Frank Clark is really good. I think Frank Clark's a great player. He's only 26 years old going into the season, so he has a lot of great football left. He's in the prime of his career. But to get a first-round pick, a second-round pick next year, and that's a pretty good deal for a player that you weren't going to pay $100 million. The contract has come out, and the Chiefs and Frank Clark have reached an agreement of 5 years, $105.5 million, which is greater than DeMarcus Lawrence's contract with $63.5 million guaranteed. Now, I would consider Frank Clark probably top 10 at his position in the league. He has, of course, he's young, but he has a lot of versatility in his game. He's a way different player from Dee Ford, which I'm sure the similarities and the comparisons are going to come up. And we're going to talk about that in the video. But he's a way different player. The Chiefs, they changed their defensive scheme. They're now more of a traditional 4-3 scheme, more of a Spagnuolo scheme sort of defense. And with Frank Clark, what you can do with him, and I'm sure Kevil could back me up on this, is you can move him in different spots on the defensive line, whether that's on the outside, whether that's in the inside to pair him up with Chris Jones. But now you basically replace Dee Ford's edge rushing productivity, but also you get a better run defender and you get a more versatile player and you get a player that's better in your new scheme on defense. So from the Chiefs' point of view, from a football aspect, this makes the Chiefs better than if they just had Dee Ford. Of course, the Chiefs also lost Justin Houston, so there's a lot of other stuff that we have to get into there, but I'm going to give it to Kevil here before I keep rambling on. Kev, from a Seahawk perspective, what do you think of this move? Did this come out of nowhere, or are you a fan of it?
Sorry, I was just moving, so I'm in a better place that you can see more of my face. So there we go.
There you go. Perfect.
There we go. Much better. Yeah, this was not a surprise to me. This was being talked about for most of the offseason since Frank Clark Frank Clark was franchised. He did say he was not going to sign that franchise tag. He did talk about holding out. Once that Russell Wilson contract came out, John Schneider even said yesterday, we have to sign. He was asked, can we sign Clark, Wagner, and Jaron Reed, and one other guy that I'm just drawing a blank on here. But he said that it would be really tough. So we knew that this was coming. We knew that Kansas City was in, Indianapolis was in, and the Jets were in. I think that the fact that they got a first-round draft pick made this a legitimate move. And I think for the Seahawks, this is a really good haul in the sense of draft picks, but it is going to be tough because they don't have a pass rusher this year. I don't think Jaron Reed is in that level yet. We're hoping for Rashad Green. Obviously, in this draft, you got to obviously get a pass rusher. That has to be more of a priority. But probably for this year, I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a setback for the team. They're not in a Super Bowl contendership. Even with Frank Clark there, I don't think that they're a Super Bowl contender. Not with the moves that they made in the offseason. But I think next year you've got 12 draft picks. You're able to sign your Bobby Wagner. You're able to extend Jaron Reed. And you can argue that Jaron Reed, a long-term, may be a little bit better than Frank Clark. We'll see what happens there. But 12 draft picks next year, 5 this year with 2 first-round picks. Expect the Seahawks to move the 21st pick and keep the 29th pick is what is being talked about right now.
Really? Because I'm just thinking through my mind is going through these mock drafts and knowing the board sort of is expecting that the Seahawks, if they're going to replace Frank Clark with the pass rusher, let's say Clelin Ferrell, for example, from Clemson, he would probably be around the 21st area. So if they were able to like snatch somebody like him, who is the first name that kind of came to my head in terms of fitting the Seattle defense and that sort of scheme, he would make a lot of sense to me at 21. I think it would make more sense to trade the 29, or is it 29?
Yeah.
29th overall pick. It would make more sense to me because I feel like the players around that area, there's probably going to be some corners going there. Probably some receivers, people looking for receivers, maybe potentially somebody trading up in the first round to get a quarterback. So I would think that the Seahawks would prefer, if I'm just speculating here, if they're going to get that replacement, they get the replacement pass rusher at 21, and then they get that 29th pick. They trade that back, potentially get 2 seconds, or maybe they, do something like that. Because I don't feel like the depth in this draft, there's not a lot of a difference between the 29th overall player and the 45th overall. I don't really see a big difference in that. So I could see the Seahawks doing that instead of the 21st overall. But I have heard that the 21st pick before this trade was in talks to be in negotiation for a trade. But I don't know right now if it is.
But my understanding from listening to Seahawks radio is it still is. Now, I'm with you. If it was me with this draft, I would say that the 21st pick with the pass rushers that there are, that would be where you would get your pass rusher, and you would move your 29th to try to get another pick, because the wide receivers are really, it's not a wide receiver first round draft, it's a wide receiver second round draft, and that is a need that needs to be filled as well. So I would be with you on that, but what it's sounding like is they're looking like they're going to be trading the 21st pick. So but I'm with you on that. Yeah,
Kev, I've seen a lot of I've seen safety mock to them. I've seen corner mock to them. I haven't seen a lot of receiver, but I understand the need for that position, even though, you have Baldwin, who's getting a little bit up there in age, but Lockett, you paid quite a bit of money. So you need that third option. It would be interesting to see if they went tight end at 21. If a Fant was there, for example. I'm not sure if they would do that, but yeah, that the Seahawks just opens up all the avenues, all the possibilities that they could potentially do. So if you're a Seahawks fan, although you did lose a great player in Frank Clark, you're more excited for the draft. Let's just be honest. There's a lot more things that you can do. Your future is, up in the air, and Pete Carroll and the Seahawks front office, they're known for being great drafters. And the way they've been even confident enough to say that we weren't sure we needed Russell Wilson. It took them that long. In the back of their mind, there was rumors floating out there that they said, hey, we can draft another Russell Wilson. We're confident enough to do that. We don't know if we want to pay him. And that's a totally different story. And like, if NFL teams in the future are going to decide to, instead of paying that average quarterback, like let's say Jared Goff, for example, trying to draft another one of those guys. But flipping back to the Kansas City perspective, as the people in the chat are loading up here, guys, let us know what you think about the move. I will get to Donnie's comment real quick because he donated $5 in the chat. Thank you, Donnie. He says, I like this for the Chiefs because now we can focus on our secondary and linebacking core, which helps us a lot. But I like this move for both clubs. This is what I was going to lead into, Donnie, is the fact that basically the Chiefs chose Frank Clark, which is not a bad move at all, but they chose Frank Clark over getting an upgrade in their secondary. Unless they're somehow going to add a veteran presence through a trade, like Patrick Peterson's on the block, apparently. I don't know if they're going to double dip there. I don't think they can afford that, but he's out there, and there's probably other names that they could acquire with a 3rd round or a 4th round pick. That potentially is the move that they could go with, or they could, go with the Seahawks 3rd round pick that they got back. But I'm saying, like, they got Frank Clark, which they added to their front 7, but in return, they're not going to be able to add a 1st round talent in their secondary instead, which a lot of people thought that they would do, which is really their true weakness. You look at the Chiefs secondary, and last year, we all know they had Ford, they had Jones, they had Houston, and their front 7 was very effective at getting after the quarterback, but they didn't have that secondary. So they continue to have corners with Charvarius Ward, Kendall Fuller, Bashaud Breeland. So like, these guys are, in my opinion, you only have one starting caliber corner on your roster right now is Kendall Fuller. The other two, Bashaud Breeland barely played football last year. Charvarius Ward is a backup. You did get Tyrann Mathieu, which will help your secondary, and definitely, you lost Eric Berry, but he's an upgrade there and he's younger. You still need to probably add another safety because Daniel Sorensen and Jordan Lucas, I don't know if they're the answer there. Their linebacking core is not the greatest. We know that they're kind of slow with Anthony Hitchens and Reggie Ragland. But I just think that what the Chiefs have tried to do is establish their presence on their front defensive line with signing Alex Okafor, obviously having Chris Jones. They have Breeland Speaks, who they drafted last year, trading for Emmanuel Ogbah, trading for Frank Clark. These are all of their new type of scheme defensive edge players that they want in Steve Spagnuolo's defense. They've completely stripped away their old identity of what it means to be an edge rusher and an edge player in their old scheme, and now they're a completely new depth chart at that position. Kevel, do you have any thoughts on the Chiefs defense and like kind of what the
I think it's really, if I was a Kansas City fan, I would ask I'm not saying that Dee Ford was a superstar, but why are you trading Dee Ford necessarily to get a Frank Clark per se? I hear what you're saying, that maybe the front 4 is a little bit better, but I do think that secondary was another thing that you look back in that AFC Championship game, and they got torched on the secondary, and they haven't really improved that. They haven't really, their linebacking, I agree with Mitch, is too slow. I don't know. Yeah, I think defensively, I understand that they're making a schematic change, but in terms of a talent base, I would be concerned on their defense. Now, you can value pass rush as much as you want, but you still have to cover the receiver. And there's still some good offensive lines out there that can protect the quarterback. So you're not always going to get to the quarterback. That's the one thing I would be concerned about. Mitch has frozen. I think is here. So, I think, from my perspective here, I think it's interesting to see what Kansas City is doing. They look like they've gotten a little bit older as well, which I think is a little bit of, I would also think a little bit of concern, not with Frank Clark, but when you get an Alex Okafor, they would be a concern as well, as Mitch has left. So let me just quickly see what is going on here in the chat and see what people have said while Mitch is coming back on. Here, just bear with me here. Yes.
We are a land of roads.
Hang
They're
on.
muddy, scenic, and steep. And now,
There we go.
we are a land of roads.
There we go. Yeah, let's see. I'm just going to go through some of the chat here. My only issue with the Frank Clark as a Chiefs fan is we gave Clark a long-term, makes a long deal with Mahomes impossible. Well, the one thing I would say that is what we're seeing with contracts and professional sports is we're seeing a lot of what is looking like really expensive now in a couple of years doesn't seem all that expensive. So I don't think that it's going to be impossible to sign Patrick Mahomes. I actually think that'll be a reasonable thing long term. Just expecting that salaries just continue to go out. Clark is a great edge rusher, but not great against the rush. Has durability issues. Well, probably, yeah. That was in some ways that's an understandable thing. But he's, hopefully he's healthy for most of the year. What receiver do you think we need to go after? I think just to me, I think like in terms of, I don't have necessarily a specific position player in mind. I would have liked to have seen if Jordy Nelson was willing to go to Seattle. I think he would have been a nice number 3, but I do think they need a number 3 kind of possession guy. I think that would be a huge help. I wouldn't be surprised if they look at tight end as well, but I think receiver they will need to look at. And I wouldn't mind also seeing a little bit of offensive line maybe as well, or a receiving tight end, as I said. Mitch is back.
My computer died.
That's all good. It
happens in the live world of the Bottom Line View.
Yes.
So what are the people discussing in the chat? The potential for the Seahawks pick?
Yeah, they're well, one of the things that I think just from maybe we'll get your perspective. I don't see this. One Kansas City fan is suggesting that this deal is not going to allow them to sign Mahomes long term. I would actually disagree. I still think, Russell Wilson's the highest paid quarterback in NFL history now, but in a couple of years that will be Patrick Mahomes.
No doubt.
I don't see them not being able to sign Mahomes.
No, they'll be able to sign Mahomes, no problem. But this won't prevent them from doing that. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made the trade. Like you can't kid yourself that Mahomes comes first. He's potentially, a Hall of Fame quarterback if he continues on the road of what he's doing, as is Russell Wilson. So they want to pay him first, and that's the front and center of what they want to do. And I think what they're trying to do right now is, we always talk about like the best way to win in the NFL is to maximize that rookie contract. So they're trying to maximize that rookie contract right now. And right now they can pay a guy like Frank Clark all that money. They can go out and sign Tyrann Mathieu. The question is, with Tyreek Hill's situation, what happens with Tyreek Hill? Do they pay Tyreek Hill? Because apparently they were going to pay him $100 million. Did Tyreek Hill's money just go to Frank Clark, or what were they determining here? And the thing also with the Chiefs is, I understand that, it seems like they have all these great players. They have Kelsey, they have Hill, they have Mahomes, they have Frank Clark, they have Chris Jones, which Chris Jones also needs to be paid, by the way. Probably won't be able to pay him. I don't know. But the question is, like, they have all this top tier talent, but comparing them to a team like my Patriots, where the Patriots don't have a lot of top tier talent, but they have a lot of middle talent, they can pay all those middle talent guys a certain amount of money, but the Chiefs are very much front loaded. They don't have a lot of depth on their roster, and And that's what's going to end up happening to them as they have to continue to pay these guys. Is, as you saw just a little bit in this free agency, they're going to have to pick and choose their battles. And like the Seahawks have been doing for years now, since basically 2012, 2013, when they were starting to figure out who they need to pay. And once Russell Wilson's first contract came up, they needed to decide what was going to happen there. So they needed to let go of certain players and move on from certain icons on their team and move forward with other players. So that's what the Chiefs are going to have to do, is once Mahomes' contract comes up, they're going to pay him, but then who's going to be let go? Once Chris Jones' contract comes up, are they going to pay him and let go of Tyreek Hill? Or are they going to pay Tyreek Hill and let go of him? Are they going to move on from Travis Kelce? So they're going to have to continue to evolve and adapt their team with the way that the salary cap is formed, which is what makes, the NFL so challenging and also so interesting in free agency.
Yeah, because you really do need the mid-tier talent is in a lot of ways what wins you championships. It's the top end is one thing, but if you don't have that strong middle end, it's hard to win.
It's the best 53 players typically win in the NFL along with coaching. So, you'll see a lot of these dream teams come out of nowhere, but usually those teams don't have the depth. Now the Chiefs, we'll see if they're able to replicate their success from a year ago. I kind of just touched on how their defense is going to change. A lot of Chiefs fans are very positive about it. They think it's going to be completely, 100% better. I still think there's going to be those issues in the secondary, which you can't get away from, but they're going to have games like they did last year where their front dominates. And, Frank Clark's going to have a great game. Chris Jones is going to have a great game, and they're going to look really good like they did against the Colts. But when they play against teams that can scheme them up and can block that front, what are they going to do against a quarterback that can throw the ball? Like maybe, let's say this year that the Colts are able to block that front and Andrew Luck has the time to deliver the ball down the field and he has another receiver to go to. Are they going to be able to cover in the back end? How is their defense going to change? Because the Chiefs are so front loaded on their defensive line now that they getting rid of that first round pick. They don't have any corners. And then also, it's interesting. That's the way the NFL goes. So you got to pick your battles, whether you have a good secondary, you have a good front seven, you try to balance it out, or that's the way the Chiefs are going. That the interesting thing is to me though, is Kev, is that they still decided to lean on our front is our strength. We're still going to rely on our front seven. We're not going to fix our secondary. We're going to change our front.
Well, and that'll be interesting because you look now in this division, when the AFC West, you got the Raiders with Antonio Brown. He's not necessarily a street guy, but he's going to catch a lot of balls. You got Cortland Sutton in Denver. You've got Williams in LA. There's a lot of speed in the receiver position on their opponents there. That I think that's going to be a very interesting challenge. I'm going to be really curious about how Kansas City's scheme is going to fit against all 6 games against some pretty fast quality receiving cores at least. And then you have New England, and then you have Pittsburgh, and then you have Houston with DeAndre Hopkins, Juju Smith-Schuster, Julian Edelman. They're facing a lot of really tough wide receivers this year it is an interesting strategy. It's a bold move, Cotton. We'll see how this plays out.
Yeah, it's maybe part of it was they figured we need to stop the run and get ourselves in 3rd and long more often so that we can't, because at the end of the day, they couldn't stop the run against the Patriots.
Well, they couldn't stop anything.
They couldn't stop anything, but it was more so the run that set up the pass.
Sure.
So maybe they figure a player like Frank Clark, adding Alex Okafor, this helps their run defense so that when they get into 3rd and long, it won't be such a big deal when our corners are on an island because they have 15 yards to go against Chris Jones and Frank Clark. I don't know. It's interesting. It's an interesting strategy. Of course, their offense will still put up points. They also need to think about, I don't think it's a big deal, but of course they lost Mitch Morse on the offensive line. A lot of mock drafts possibly had them going with the center in the first round, so they possibly need to pick one in the later rounds to replace him. But I don't think that's too big of a deal because he's been injured on and off, and they've been able to replace him pretty well. Seahawks, are you just giving up on this season?
I don't. Well, they're not going into the season as a Super Bowl contender. I think that maybe they're a playoff contender, maybe, but not a Super Bowl contender. So you still have a lot of work to do anyway. Is it a hit if the Seahawks do not miss the playoffs? That's probably a little bit disappointing, but in the long term, there's a lot of things that need to happen here that we'll have to see. I'm not saying they're not making the playoffs. There's a lot of factors in play here, but in terms of an actual Super Bowl contender, the Seahawks are not a Super Bowl contender right now. To me, the way that I'm looking at the NFC is it's probably Rams still a little bit, although I do think that they'll take a step back, but it's probably Eagles, Cowboys, Saints still are probably your top three right now in my mind. Yeah. So
it's interesting. The NFC West, I'm looking out for those 49ers. I'm backing those 49ers.
I know you're not backing those 49ers. I'm not there yet.
Kevel, okay, so with the first round picks, there's the 21, the 29. We kind of talked about the 29 possibly being traded back into the second round and getting some extra picks. But let's try and make like sort of a prediction, or not necessarily a prediction, but what you want to see. So at 21, what position would you like them to pick?
I think that they'll need to address the pass rusher because this is where the draft is strong. I would like to see them get a pass rusher. I'm intrigued by the idea of Jeffrey Simmons because he's expected to go there.
Yeah, I had them picking him. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm intrigued by the idea. I know that he's injured, but he's a top 5 talent. 29, if a guy like Andre Dillard is still available, I wouldn't mind offensive line being the second option. Wide receiver, I think that you can get that a little bit later in the draft. But to me, in terms of first round, I think you got to get your lines fixed.
I think with the offensive line, it almost seems like they've kind of given up on that. I don't know. We'll see. But I feel like a guy like Dillard would probably be – I would hope the Texans would pick him. If he goes past the Texans, I am going to be mad at the Texans because they have no offensive line. But yeah, we could see the Seahawks potentially address their lines. I would like to see them. I would like to see 2 picks on the D line. I had the mock. I actually mocked this trade with the Chiefs in my mock draft. I don't know if you saw my mock draft, but I nailed this. So I had them getting this pick in my mock draft. I also had them trading back 21. With the Packers. So I think it was 29 and 30. So they had back-to-back picks. So I had them picking an edge rusher and a interior lineman. So I had them pick Simmons and who was the other player I had them pick? Ferguson, Jalen Ferguson.
Right.
I had them picking those 2 guys, which I wouldn't mind at all either, because I think they do also could use some help inside as well with Simmons or a player like of that caliber. But I would like to, changing my mind there on the mock draft, I would like to see them keep the 21st pick and potentially trade the 29 pick as we discussed.
I would be with you, but what I'm hearing is it's going to be the other way around. But it's just going
could potentially stay in the first round then.
Yeah, that would be Daniel Jeremiah in mock draft 3 has Jeffrey Simmons going 21, and 29, for those who are curious, was a cornerback Byron Murphy. You could see.
I'm not a huge Byron Murphy fan, but I understand he's up there for a lot of people.
Yeah. It's to me, I wouldn't mind a Jeffrey Simmons or a Klein Farrell. I think are fit there. I'm not sure about Byron Murphy either. Maybe a Marquise Brown, but I'd wait till the second round on that. Chris Lindstrom is a drop pick in 27, which would be interesting, I guess. There is a cornerback field with Rock Ya-Sing, Byron Murphy, Drew Lock.
Yeah.
Maybe a Dexter Lawrence could be an interesting guy as well. So we'll see.
All right, let's get back to the chat. I don't know where you were on the chat.
Oh, I didn't go right to the top. So.
Okay, let's just go all over the place because I have no idea. What's going on, Cole? Charles says they would trade Clark to the Niners in a heartbeat for Bosa.
Who would?
Nick Bosa, I guess. don't know. I don't know the. Okay, so I will say there was talks that the Jets were coming down to the end of this trade too.
Oh, that would have been if the Seahawks would have got the second,
it would have been the third overall pick, but the Jets didn't want to give up the third overall pick.
I would understand.
But also the Seahawks, apparently the reason why they didn't do it was because they wanted 2 firsts, and they would have had to give up the 21st pick in order to get the third pick. So they would have ended up with a better player, but they would have had to trade their first pick, and they preferred having multiple picks.
Yeah.
That was the report.
You want multiple picks. I think that's a bit. I can understand why you didn't make the trade with the Jets.
Yeah. Matthew can play the slot corner, says Rick Badboy. Yes, he can, but also Kendall Fuller is a slot corner as well. So it's kind of I'm sure he will play a little bit.
Matthew is a better safety though.
Yeah, he is a better safety, but he can kind of do a little bit of everything, which is why it was a good signing by the Chiefs, because they need everything. Cole says, my only issues with the Frank Clark trade are the price we paid and the fact that the deal gave Clark $105.5 million. He talks about makes the long-term deal with Mahomes impossible. I'm sure that's the comment you brought up.
Yeah.
I don't think the money is too out of his price range, though. Like, just discussing his price range, he is around the caliber of DeMarcus Lawrence. So I don't really feel like that is a bad price to pay for him. It's just combining giving a first-round pick, giving a second-round pick, and $105 million. I'm not sure I would have done that. I know my team never does that, so, like, I don't know. But it depends on how the Seahawks do in the draft. If we look back and the Seahawks get 2 great players and we're like, wow, that Frank Clark trade really, set them ahead for another 5 years of really good football. Or if we look back at the trade and they pull a Cleveland Browns or Oakland Raiders and we're sitting there and it's like, well, they got crap. That was a terrible trade for the Seahawks. They should have kept Frank Clark. So it really all depends on the draft picks because, like the draft picks at the end of the day, they're picks. They end up being players, and it depends who the players are to really determine the value of this trade. Yeah, it looks sexy on paper that the trades are, or that the trade is for picks, and these picks can potentially be great players. But what if they're busts?
Yeah.
You don't know.
For one comparison has always been for Frank Clark has been Danielle Hunter for the Vikings, who's making 9 and 19, 10 and 20, 11 and 21, 11.4, 21, 22, and 23. So I will imagine he will be making a little bit more, but like his base salary is probably in the same range. And Danielle Hunter and Frank Clark have similar stats as well.
Yeah, they're a little bit different players, but they're kind of in the same price range.
They're in the same price range, yeah.
They're in the same sort of caliber of players. James Glenn says there are only about 6 good safeties. The edge class is very deep. Charles says, watch, guys. Ed Oliver has the number 2 player coming into the season behind Bozo with little defensive help. Rick Badboy says, you guys think Rashawn Gary will slide with an injury update? I heard about that injury update, but I'm sure that NFL teams already sort of knew about this. Would you not think that NFL teams already know about the Rashawn Gary injury? Would you not know that they knew that Sweat had this deal with his heart? Like, they knew this stuff, I feel like. Yeah. And if those players fall, like, I really don't understand. Even Jeffrey Simmons, to a certain degree, I don't understand not picking a player in the spot he deserves to be picked because he tore his ACL. How many NFL players have torn their ACL?
Well,
like
I guess it depends on what his recovery time is like, right?
Yeah. And everybody's concerned. I understand, like, if you're a team that needs to win right away and you would rather prefer to pick like a player that can help you this year to win the Super Bowl, I understand that over the fact of because he's not going to be there for like half the season or 3/4 of the season. Like you said, it depends on the timetable. But to me, you're looking at these guys as projections, and you're not necessarily counting on them to be first year go-to like great players. Like, I don't know. That's just me with draft picks.
Yeah, I think that Simmons is a guy that you could probably wait on, but the question is can teams wait? That's the problem, right?
Denise says, "Who cares about the past? Who are y'all to judge? Guess everyone's perfect in their normal life." Oh, he's talking about the Frank Clark baggage. What do you think about the Chiefs in general taking on all these players with similar backgrounds?
Well, didn't the Patriots do that for a number of years?
Not really.
Moss had some baggage.
Weed and not playing.
No, there was baggage though, right?
Not like criminal baggage. Most of it's like drug. Patriots have taken on players with like bad attitudes. That's different from like criminal offenses.
Well, I guess it's an interesting question.
I'm not saying like it was a bad move because this happened. I'm just saying it's interesting and everybody's bringing it up, so it's a topic of conversation.
Yeah, they cut Kareem Hunt and they bring in Frank Clark.
Yeah, exactly.
Fascinating to me. Yeah.
Well, the thing is that they would have never cut Kareem Hunt if this happened 3 years ago.
And they may not have cut Kareem Hunt if this video didn't come out.
Yeah, because they didn't cut him until like months after. So
yeah, I don't know. I think that teams look over it's talent over character, and most NFL teams are like that. So
what do you think of if they were to draft Simmons? Because this is kind of part of the reason I thought they would draft Simmons is because they drafted McDowell. Even though Simmons is a lot better player and he's regarded as a lot higher of a pick than McDowell ever was, that's a similar situation.
Yeah, they're very comparable. Except I don't know everything about Jeffrey Simmons, but I'm assuming that this guy has a bit of a better attitude than Malik McDowell. I think that in part was why he was cut. Like what McDowell did was pretty irresponsible though. And like he injured himself in the off season where Simmons comes in a bit injured already. So I think that's the other thing. So I don't think I don't think McDowell necessarily shies him away from Jeffrey Simmons. I think Pete and John they see this guy as a talent. They'll take the rest.
All right. I think we're going to wrap it up here. We'll just end off with our overall thought, just saying who won the trade. And Kev, you can say, what's your thoughts from a Seattle perspective? And I'll give the Chief perspective.
Well, I think the negative part about this is the Seahawks do not have a pass rusher right now that can impact and change the game. They did trade it. But again, were you going to sign him for what he got, DeMarcus Lawrence money? No, you weren't. Well, if you were able to get a first-round pick for him, then you make the move. So I think in that sense, yes, it's good. And I think 12 picks next year gives him a really good opportunity what happens in 2020. So still some work for Seattle to do. Kansas City, I think there's some very – I'm going to be very intrigued where this defense goes because it feels like they're trying to win 35-31. Can you win in this NFL 35-31? That's what Kansas City is kind of gambling on. I'm intrigued because I don't know if this will work.
You know what this actually reminds me of as I just think of it now? The Chiefs are building their team very reminiscent to the Colts of the early 2000s.
Yeah.
They want pass rushers so that when they're winning the game, they can pass rush. But the problem is what happens when you're losing the game.
Yeah.
That's what everything changes. But if I had to give a winner for the trade, it's tough, but I would stick with my first instinct in saying that the Seahawks won the trade because they got good value for a player they weren't going to pay. So they got a first-round pick, they got a second-round pick, they swapped thirds. Again, that's the confirmed status of the trade. And they didn't have to pay him $105 million.
Yeah.
While I think the Chiefs got a great player in Frank Clark, don't get me wrong. And he's better than Dee Ford, don't get me wrong. They still have a player at the same position. They, without that first round pick, are not going to be able to add a corner, which is their worst position on their team. And I think they still need secondary. So overall, paying $105 million for a player that, yes, he upgrades your team. Yes, he's a great player. You could have used that on a different position and a different player that could have helped you, possibly even more, but who knows?
Yeah.
So that's my overall overarching opinion with the Chiefs. Frank Clark trade. Let me know in the comment section below, if you guys aren't live right now, what you thought on the trade. It's been Mitch and Kevil. I have a video coming out probably. I haven't decided if it's going to come out tonight or tomorrow, but it's going to be very, very fun, and I'm sure Kevil is going to love it. Okay? It's casting the Avengers with NFL players.
Oh, that's fun.
So check that video out. It's coming out rather tonight or tomorrow. It's a fun one. Go check out my mock draft if you haven't already. By the way, predicted this trade absolutely 100% correct. So go check that out. From Mitch and Kev.
Oh, we did. By the way, Avengers Endgame preview. Check that out. It'll be out tomorrow.
Okay, it'll be out tomorrow. All right. Peace.